Now, today is going to be a really interesting one because we're going to be looking at a subject which I don't think is explored nearly enough. We often talk about what autism looks like in either children or young adults, but hardly ever do we look at it from midlife onwards. Whether or not this means you were diagnosed before and just how it changes chemically and how it looks different in older people, or if you're diagnosed from mid-age onwards. I'm Nat from Exceptional Individuals, and today we are going to be joined by a very special guest, Yasoda, who works with us on our mentoring and coaching. And we are going to be learning about autism in 40 plus. So what happens when you go from midlife onwards? What does it look like? How is it different, social and also biologically? So yeah, Yasoda, over to you.
So that's our topic, autism at 40. And just a quick introduction about Exceptional Individuals and what we do. So we do a lot of recruitment, training, and as Nat said, we do a lot of coaching, mentoring, and support at in-work support. You can check us out on our website as well if you want more information. This is our first slide, just quick check-in and how everyone's feeling today. So we've got a lot to tackle today. So I'm going to do some of the talking, but I also want to make sure I hear from all of you. I want to know what your experiences have been, and I think the group here will benefit from you guys sharing your own experiences as well. So we're going to talk about what happens when you turn 40. We're also going to talk about why it's more difficult to diagnose girls or women. We'd like to hear from you about what was it like before your diagnosis, what made you want to get a diagnosis, and what kind of happened after. So first question, what decade were you born in?
This is great. We'll get to see a real mix, hopefully.
Yeah.
No 50s. Oh, fair enough.
Okay, lots of 70s and 80s. Okay, so definitely the right audience. So I'm just going to quickly share with you about what happens kind of when you turn 40. So there's the male and female aging and menopause sort of symptoms. Obviously, this is obviously very general. And as we go on talking about menopause or andropause, you will find that it actually is quite different for neurotypical versus neurodiverse individuals. So if you can put a pin of if you have any of the symptoms, you don't have to be 40. You might start feeling perimenopausal or periandropause as early as mid-30s, actually. Just like to see if anybody has these symptoms.
Yeah, just put a little dot on the stick figure wherever you think you're experiencing certain things. If you're not, no worries. I know for myself, I picked lack of focus and motivation, even though I'm not at that stage of life yet. I think some of these things just go hand in hand with being neurodiverse. Audra says, I had a total mastectomy last year, so I'm full on in surgical menopause and is not working well. Oh, and heart. Oh, man, sorry you had to go through that. Hope you're doing well now, though.
Thank you. Yeah, so generally with the women, you'll have the irregular menstrual periods, and with men, generally the decreased energy and lack of focus has been quite common. So when you were pre-menopausal or even menopausal, did you find that your autistic symptoms were heightened? Just like to get a feel of what it was like for you.
Okay, nice. So were any of your like autistic senses like extra tingly? So did you find it more difficult to do certain social interactions? Did you find it more difficult with all the kind of standard things that go with being autistic? Was it more subtler or more like enhanced almost?
Okay, so it's quite divided. Thank you for that. And just again, just trying to get a feel of anything else that you felt that changed when you sort of turned 40. It can be the way you looked at things. It could be the way you felt. It could be a stage in life. Something happened that changed. High anxiety. Ease with myself, yeah. Can relate to that. Yes, the weight gain is a big one. Alcohol. Okay.
So it seems there was a lot of changes, to be fair, whether
Mhm.
good or bad. It's, giving up alcohol, feeling more at ease with yourself, but then there's also putting on weight faster, which is perfectly normal at that age, to be fair. But interesting, some of you have had higher anxiety, which again is something that I wasn't familiar with that happened. But I guess from what you were saying, Yasoda, about the changes that happened at the time, particularly relating to autism, not surprising.
Yeah, so anxiety, weight gain are all sort of the typical menopausal symptoms. But generally, if you're neurodiverse, they tend to be more enhanced. And especially if you've got sensory issues, sometimes that can be heightened as well. Endometriosis, yeah. Yeah, the anxiety and depression one is quite big. Cool. Thank you guys for sharing. I'm just going to move on and just want to talk about why boys are diagnosed 4 times more often than girls. So obviously we all have talked about diagnostic bias before in our previous presentations, previous webinars, but there's also some new research coming up with talks about something called a female protective effect. I'll just go into that briefly and I'll share my sources with you at the end of the presentation. So generally females are more resistant to mutations linked to autism. And one of the examples is, so the chromosome that's identified that causes autism, the girls have a protein called ERK that can compensate for that deletion. So therefore, it is resistant to the mutation. And as we know, girls generally are better at compensating behaviorally as well. So that leads to obviously why they are not diagnosed as much. And interestingly, girls can carry the same mutation as boys, but do not have the condition. So they could be carriers of the mutation. And potentially what will happen is that their kids might have autism. And just some preliminary research findings, again, with menopause linked with autism, like you guys said and shared with me just now, that you just have sort of heightened social, emotional, sensory difficulties, and sometimes not having the information to navigate menopause just generally means you don't get the necessary support. Being menopausal and neurodiverse, sometimes it's quite difficult to explain to your healthcare professionals exactly what's going on. Sometimes it's quite hard to differentiate which is which, not having the right words. And the symptoms are actually quite different from someone who's neurotypical. And again, because GPs lack knowledge generally in menopause, and then obviously with neurodiversity thrown into the mix, people feel they didn't get enough support. So I just wanted to highlight to you that there's actually this study that is going on, and if you want to get involved in it, it's called Bridging the Silos, and it's actually a research partnership of autistic advocates and academics actually studying the experiences of menopause among autistic people in Canada and the UK. I will share this link later as well so that you can sign up for it if you're interested. It's just a way for us to all get more information and hopefully improve the support that is available for us. So why is it that people in their 40s and 50s seem to have it harder than the sort of younger children, young adults that have been diagnosed recently? Well, because in the 70s, if you look back in the 60s and 70s, the treatment options were shock therapy. There was very little understanding about what autism was, and most times it was sort of confused with psychosis. The only person that sort of had sort of lived experiences was Dr. Temple Grandin, where she created the squeeze machine, and followed by the Wing and Gold triad of impairments theory, which was talking about social interaction, language and communication, and repetitive behavior in a triad. And because obviously there was not enough research and there was not enough known, schools had very little understanding, and therefore kids that sort of just learn differently were just not supported. and diagnosis at that time was sort of at its infancy stage. We were only at sort of a version 2 of the diagnosis tool that was used, DSM or the ICD, which was in the late 70s.
I think for me, the basic things you all need to know that if you grew up in the 70s and you had a hard time with autism, it's not surprising. It was a bad time to be autistic at the beginning, because we went from like the 30s where we were learning about autism, but through some questionable means. And then as we got into the 70s, it was seen as a bad thing. You were a bad parent. You were not very smart if you had it. It was a bad time. But then it gets better. However, as we all know, childhood affects us for the rest of our life. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s now who have a very complicated relationship with autism.
So this is just kind of, again, talking about the treatment timelines, and again, reiterating Nat's point that it was kind of what you had to go through. And because there was not enough understanding, the treatment was quite at its infancy stage. It was probably a huge struggle compared to what is available now. If, let's say, if a child is diagnosed with autism, you have so many different options and therapies that parents can evaluate and have access to, compared to in the 70s, which was shock therapy. So I'd like to hear from you, other than obviously the lack of diagnosis, the lack of knowledge, and lack of support that you didn't have growing up, what other influences did you think made you what you are today? Okay, so family value system, the time we lived in, yeah. Education. Thank you for that. Yeah. So obviously, why is that so? Is obviously, I'm just going to go back to a quick ecological system theory, which talks about, as a child, your lived experiences are influenced by your microsystem, which is obviously your immediate family. Then all the things you guys talked about, your mesosystem, which is your education, school, what you could access. Exosystem is policy and law at the time that you were growing up. And obviously the macrosystem is everything beyond that. And obviously chrono is the time that you lived in. Just to give you a visual about what you guys were saying about the other influences. What age did you get diagnosed or believed you were autistic? If I can just get an idea of what that was. Celia, thank you for sharing that you were not able to access speech therapy. It's quite sad. Thank you. Oh, it's very varied, actually. And what was it like before you got diagnosed, especially those who got sort of diagnosed later, sort of in adulthood? What was it like?
Yeah, that definitely makes more sense. For the people who said they were diagnosed at 3 or 4, I don't know.
But, you can remember.
It's a good question, though. Like, for instance, Fazana, there you are. Knew you'd be around.
I just want to say I think it seems weird because if you're diagnosed with something else, especially if you've got complex conditions overlapping, you always associate why you're different with that until you met somebody who recognized your symptoms. I think it was really difficult, but I think it's very easy now because I think every child knows what autism is.
Thank you, Fazana. So a lot of being misunderstood is what you're trying to say. Confusing.
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think, to see where you fit in, which category you fit in. Because I was asking people the questions, some of the autism, and they said, no, I don't think you have that. But it's something about me, they think I do have it. But I didn't get an answer from everybody else until I met somebody, luckily. I went to sport group. It was in Scotland, and I came across somebody, It's only then he recognised something about me, and he told the person who brought me to that support group that I think she might have Asperger's, and I thought, what's Asperger's?
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't have known if I didn't meet him, and it's only till I think 2016 I was diagnosed. It was very late.
Yeah, so thank you. Just basically it was difficult from what you guys are all saying was you guys really struggled, lots of masking and tired due to burnout, difficulty with the relationships. Yeah, the stress to fit in. Yeah. Thank you. And just to hear from you again, what made you want to do it? What made you want a diagnosis?
I think for me, it was like to improve my life and get a strategy and coping mechanism in place and understand myself, I think, better as why I do what I do, why I'm a bit different, and why I struggle to fit in.
Thank you. To understand yourself better, chronic fatigue, sensory issues.
I like the one that says daughter was diagnosed and doctor says you're just like your dad. Yeah, being hereditary, that is a way that a lot of people get picked up.
Yeah.
Burnout, hard to maintain day-to-day jobs, overwhelming sense of anxiety and confusion, understanding myself. To be honest, a lot of these are very common. Younger people tend to need it for like, I don't know, university or school to get like support. But as an adult, I think a lot of it comes down to just understanding yourself better, making sense of the way you are. So it's great to see that a lot of us are on the same page on this.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. Yeah, it's just... So yeah, so these were, again, the list of common reasons for being diagnosed to overcome trauma. And I think you guys, a lot of you have shared to just understand why you are the way you are, to educate yourself, to get support. And yeah, and the other one, common one is my child was recently diagnosed. It's generally the most common reasons. So Nat, over to you to share with us some famous autistic adults.
Okay, can you spin that wheel?
Okay.
This is a new feature of fun. So all you got to do is push enter.
Okay.
And essentially, we often look at autism from a youth perspective, but actually there are a lot of adults who are autistic and proud. So to start off with, we've got Temple Grandin. We've already mentioned her today, but if you don't know her, look her up. She's a cowgirl and an absolute badass based in Colorado. She created a hug machine. It's literally like, if you ever go onto farms, there's these like weird metal contraptions that squeeze cows to keep them calm because cows apparently don't like being milked. And she thought, I wonder if that could work for people because there's a calming effect when you're in like a tight little nook. And so she created the squeeze machine or hug machine. And since then, she's gone on to create like books, she's done TED Talks, and she shows autism from a really unique human perspective. So yeah, a really great autistic role model who is doing better in older life than she was in younger life. She says she's so much more comfortable now than she has ever been, which I think is really reassuring. Yo, spin that wheel. Melanie Sides. So, yo, I don't know much about Melanie apart from she's very lovely. So what do you know about her?
So she's a host from Today, and just the reason we picked her was basically because she was one of those people as well who got diagnosed later as an adult in her 30s, mid to late 30s. And so she talks about how she did it because she wanted to understand herself better. She was, again, quite tired and of masking and, not being able to be herself.
Nice. And if any of you know any other people, do put it in the chat because it's always great to know more other autistic role models. Well, they don't necessarily have to be role models, just autistic adults. You know what? I'm going to go with Susan Boyle because I'm done with Temple. Susan Boyle has autism. For those of you who don't know, she won Britain's Got Talent. She's pretty amazing. And she completely changed perspective. Her whole life, she wasn't really aware. She was seen weird as different. But when she was allowed to perform in an area that she thrived in, she took over the world. She dreamed a dream and she's done amazing. So I think Susan is a great example of how you can do what you want in life, but it doesn't mean you have to conform. I think she still lives in the same house she's lived in her entire life. Yes, she's got, a nice haircut now, but she's still essentially her, and that has not changed. And that's something which I think is a great gift with autism. There is this element of authenticity. You just seem more real, despite people not really always understanding you. And the last one we have is Christine McGuinness. So Yasona, do you want to talk about that one? I mean, I doubt the wheel's going to end on her.
Okay, I'm going to stop. Christine McGuinness is actually the wife of Paddy McGuinness, is the guy that does Top Gear. And interestingly, he always thought his wife was autistic. And then he had 3 kids with her, and they were all diagnosed with autism. And then she got diagnosed after that. And there's actually, I don't know what you call it, like a clip on BBC iPlayer where she talks about her journey if you're interested. Please, definitely check it out.
Nice. And in the chat, we've got Elon Musk. Yes, he is autistic. He fairly recent, it was on SNL. He said he has Asperger's syndrome, which, as we know, is part of the autistic spectrum. And so, I think he is a polarizing figure in the autistic community. But if you love him, wow, he is impressive, like Rocket Man or what. And then we also have Richard Branson, Lindsay says. But I just want to put it out there because as far as I was aware, Richard Branson is a real big dyslexic advocate. I don't think I've heard him talk about autism before, but correct me if I'm wrong, honestly, because who knows? Now, a good quote that I like from Temple, because for me, she is my favorite autistic adult. She says, if I could snap my fingers and would be non-autistic, I would not. Autism is part of what I am. And this is a really interesting question because a lot of you here are here because having autism sucks. And I say that as an advocate because particularly if you grew up in the 70s or before or just after, it wasn't a good thing to be autistic. It was very much seen as a negative. So your opinion of it now might still be quite negative. But as you learn to understand how your mind works, as society changes, hopefully you start to see the good that there is. Now, there are some people who believe things like having autism is like having a superpower. I don't like that because what that's saying is that it's all good. It's all sunshine and rainbows and fighting crime. No, there are challenges and those challenges are very real, but there's also positives. So it's appreciating the highs and the lows. And that's what I like about Temple. She's not saying I'm a person who has autism or lives with autism. She is autistic. It is part of her identity. So it's really interesting to see what the rest of you think. Just having a look, Lindsay says, oh, maybe it's ADHD he has. Who knows? I hate the superpower thing. Yeah, screw superpowers. Ashley says, I find more things made sense rather than being negative. I understand me now. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just really important to know that it's a mixed bag, really. We're all, we all have different experiences. But I agree with you. The older you get, the more you learn, the more things make sense. And I think some of the biggest difficulties with autism is just not knowing why you're different to others and why that the world just doesn't seem like it was created for you. Turns out it wasn't, but not knowing it for a fact can be a really jarring experience. What do you know now about autism that you wish you knew sooner? So this could have been a while ago. Is there anything now as an adult that you think, damn, I wish I knew that, or I'd be darned? Now, this could be anything from the science, from yourself, from a personal perspective. And,
for
go for it, yes.
It was not mingling with the people. making friends.
Mm. Yeah, I think maybe I probably would try less hard with people to make friends and just focus on the people I did connect with. But interesting. Another comment we have is how differently affected women compared to men, especially in the menopause. And I'll be honest with you, I'll admit when my knowledge is at its limits. This was an area I did not know about, and this is why I had to get back up. It needs to be talked more about. I'm sure I can't be the only one here today who was surprised that there was a connection. We've got how to prepare for social situations. Yep. There were separate types of it if they were diagnosed before 2013. Yeah, it gets confusing. Okay, so you've got Asperger's, you've got classic, you've got Rett's, pick your poison. We've got that you don't have to be a genius. Absolutely. I'm sick of people saying, oh, the autistic genius gene. Nope. Some of us, maybe like 1%, can say the alphabet backwards or standing on one leg with their eyes shut. The rest of us cannot. Autism doesn't equal genius, but what it does equal is more of a unique set of skills. So rather than being a generalist, you're more of a specialist, but it doesn't mean you have to be the best in the world. We give far too much attention to the autistic superpower when actually autistic people are just like everyone else. You get some really great ones and you get some, okay ones. Not everyone in this world is a code breaker. That I'm okay and not broken. I like that. That's a really good one. To know about sensory issues, needing rules, routines. I am allergic to small talk. Gesundheit. Being able to talk and share to help with learning ways and to manage better was amazing. I like all of these. Oh, Laurie says, as if I just stood up to say if I could still stand on one leg with my... I thought everyone could do that. Absolutely. Ashley says, I find more things make sense rather than being negative. I understand me now. These are all really, really nice to sit here and read, to be honest.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was just going to add that, yeah, I think with the menopause thing, people view it as two different things. And I think not realizing that actually how it's quite closely interlinked. So yeah, and there's only research coming out about it now, and therefore getting the right support is very, very difficult.
Can I ask? I'm interested in that research you're talking about. But if you forward me the link, please. I really appreciate that.
Yes, Fazan, I'll put it at the end so that yeah, if you guys can and have the capacity to participate, it will be good for you to be involved so that for the better. Yeah, thank you.
And we also got why I easily make mistakes with understanding what people mean or what they are asking of me, if that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. I'm continuously misreading people. And I'll tell you, I was the person who says I got diagnosed at 3 for autism. And I'll tell you what, my life was still difficult even knowing, because no one told me what autism was. But if I had to go my whole life and not even know there was this mysterious thing, I could imagine it'd be very upsetting, to be honest, because being ill, well, I'm not saying having autism is being ill, but with talking about analogy, like when you've got like something going on in your body and you can't explain it, it's terrifying. And being diagnosed, I tell you what, 9 times out of 10, it's normally less serious than what you thought it was originally. And I think with autism, it's a great release, because autism isn't a bad thing, or at least it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And so it can be a really good kind of, I'm okay. But yeah, these are really, really great. Okay, I'm lucky that I'm under a menopause specialist in London. My superpower is being pushy and self-advocating even when I'm exhausted. I think a lot of us have to be amazing self-advocates. Never let a no be a no. I think getting support for autism is like mission impossible. And I tell you what, there's a reason why there's like a term called like autistic mums. They are like relentless in getting support for their children. But as adults, we might not have that super mum. So we have to take that mantle ourselves. It's exhausting, but we have to, unfortunately. Okay, nice. Next, you say that? So yeah, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So The support available, like I said, is quite, there isn't much available. So there's a lot of sort of community groups, like Facebook groups and autistic mom groups that are available on social media. EI obviously provides coaching and mentoring. We do not discriminate by age. And obviously there's workplace needs assessments, especially for those of you who've just been recently diagnosed. Please approach us as well for that. The National Autistic Society has some support programs, and they actually have community-based programs by location. So please check it out as well. Celia saying, I'm still going through the acceptance journey. And again, because of the limited support, we were hoping that if you know of any support that you have accessed and had a good experience with, can you please share with the rest of us so that we can look it up and it can be put onto our list?
Yeah, basically, we get told, don't we, all the time that what support is out there for adults. And it's a bit awkward because there isn't really. And it's one of the reasons exceptional individuals exist, to support adults rather than children, because there just isn't the same amount of support out there. But if we're missing a trick and actually there is support out there, or at least other organizations which have worked for you, even if they're not directly related to autism, please do share, because I think it's always really helpful to expand our knowledge.
I agree with you, Nat. I always find rather lacking support for adults.
It is really upsetting, to be honest, because you see that, oh, this looks perfect for me. And then you realize it's aimed at a completely inappropriate age group for you. We've got a comment that says, I just finished coaching with Nikki Collins. I actually know someone called Nikki Collins, but I'm guessing it's a completely different person. The autism coach, very catchy name. We've got alcohol and drugs. Very glad it says ironic on the end, because unfortunately, people with autism and ADHD are actually more prone to have bad relationships with alcohol and drugs as a means of kind of like softening the world when it is being so loud and intense, and to cope with like the struggles that having autism in a non-autistic world can have. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you that's a very damaging way to be, but just so you know that if this is a challenge that you have or are having, that unfortunately you're not alone. And it can be contributed to your neurodiversity in some aspects. Friends and family acceptance and understanding. Okay, nice. I mean, we aren't all as lucky to have that, but if you can have your family backing you, then that goes, well, that's priceless. We've got the NDSA is a non-profitable organization run by autistic individuals. I'm currently enrolled on an employment support program, which is providing really useful to get to know myself. NDSA, Neurodiversity Self-Advocacy. I've never heard of that, but that sounds really good, and I'll look that up. I wish there was something like the Autistic Helper app for adults. Oh, nice. I'm guessing that's for children, but I haven't tried that out myself. Ashley says there's Paige Lai is good on YouTube. There are actually a lot of great YouTubers as well. I'm so jealous. I wish I was one of them, but we'll get there. But to be honest, we actually haven't had many comments on this slide, and I think that speaks volumes for the amount of support that currently is out there. Oh, Celia says Olivia Hobbs, YouTube female advocate for autism. Great. Okay, yeah, should we go next? Now, we always talk about this slide, and it's kind of just like a standard one now, but I think today is probably more appropriate than ever, is that in the UK at least, there is support available for those who have autism and in work. Now, the great thing about it, this called access to work, is that you don't actually have to be diagnosed with autism in order to get the support. The only catch is that you have to have a job. And I know what probably some of you are thinking, what? I need support to get the job. I don't make the rules. I mean, that's why we offer our services for free. But if any of you are employment and are autistic, or highly believe you are, then get in contact, because we can help with an assessment, and we can get in a grant, and you can get software, training, equipment. I think it's one of the government's best kept secrets. And I do think if you do not at least apply for it, if you're entitled to it, I think it's a missed opportunity. So just at least have it at the back of your head. And if you have any questions about what am I even on about, what is this grant, I think I might be eligible, I'm not sure, get in contact. It's completely free to you. and completely free to the employer 9 times out of 10. So it's definitely worth investigating. Oh yeah, Audra says she's used Scope to get support. That's great. I think Scope's a great organisation as well. Women and Autism / Asperger UK support group on Facebook. Yes, Facebook is loaded with support groups. You've got to be mindful because a lot of them are like those autism mums, but there are groups for autism adults as well. I think there's Autism London or London Autism. There's a really good group and they're really active as well.
I'll just quickly summarize, Matt. So the source of a lot of the new research that's coming out on autism is by Spectrum News. I'll put the links in a bit. And the name of the research is called Bridging the Silos, is the one that I was speaking about with menopause and autism. And obviously, you know our website that you can contact us for support.
Nice. Spectrum News is definitely worth checking out if none of you have seen it before. It's like all you need to know about autism, like keeping up to date. The report I've not seen myself, but I don't know about you. Whenever I think of silos, I just think of like the pig poo from the Simpsons movie, but I'm sure it has another meaning. And for us, obviously, I'd recommend what we do, but just know that I like to think we're not the only organisation that does this type of thing. So if you do get in touch with other organisations, honestly, great for you. We're definitely under the opinion that we want to work with other organisations. We're not competing with them. So do put us in touch with any companies that you think might be relevant and we can hopefully get the word out there. At the moment, we're UK based, let's be honest, mainly London. But I think there's definitely a need for it worldwide. But let's just say world domination has taken a little bit longer than we would like to have hoped. But I definitely see it on the tables.
Any questions from anybody?
Yeah. Any questions on your 40th birthday plans, what it's like to be autistic as an adult? Yes, go for it, Fozan. I can always count on you for a good question.
Pardon?
I can always count on you to have a good question lined up.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I was going to say, I know you talk about menopause, right? Obviously, silly question. Autistic ladies, do they have a different experience with more menopause to non-typical neurodiverse people?
Yeah, Fazana. So there's not enough research and there's not enough data, but generally the women that the research group that I was talking about that have interviewed have actually said that their symptoms are quite different. And so therefore having conversations with a healthcare professional has been quite difficult. The misunderstanding continues. And most times what happens is the GP just treats you for your symptoms, not kind of looking at it holistically.
And the other lady, Andrea, sorry, I'm talking too much there. Andrea, who's left about the menopause clinic, I would like to know the name of it as well, if that's okay. It's really interesting, and I really want to, I don't know, I feel I've got that to say on this compared to someone else.
Did you want me to talk about my experience at all? Well, I'd had chronic pain for years. Unfortunately, I had a big cyst that grew onto my left ovary in 2010 and I had to have it removed surgically. So that over the years, whilst that was kind of recovering, I developed adhesions, which is what caused the chronic pain and which kind of led me towards a hysterectomy. But also I found, and this is probably part of the autism, I found that during certain times of the month I was experiencing an exacerbation of PMS, which can be called PME or PMDD, which is probably another thing you could go into entirely again. So that's kind of what led me down the road of getting a hysterectomy. But it is really, really hard. And I mean, personally, I've got nobody to compare with, but I guess my symptoms are probably, like I said, quite typical of what anyone would go through in the menopause. But I think as an autistic woman, it's probably how you cope with it, as opposed to somebody with a neurotypical brain who can reason things off maybe a little bit better and can. I'm quite lucky because I was a nurse, so I can articulate my needs quite well because I've got that medical background. But I would also understand that for a lot of other people who don't, it would be really hard to have that conversation you know, with a healthcare professional, because, and I'm by no means am I a specialist in gynecological issues or anything like that, or women's health, but I do a lot of my own research, which is probably my, you know, where the special interest comes in and things like that. I hyper focus on things that are affecting me or affecting my family, and I go down a rabbit hole. So that's where it comes into the self-advocating as well. It's quite useful for that. But yeah, I mean, having a hysterectomy again is a different type of menopause as well. It's being absolutely thrown into it at the deep end. It's not like a woman of a certain age would typically enter the menopause, because there's a tailing off of the estrogen levels and all the other hormones. But whereas mine have just gone bang, like they've gone, there's a cut off and they've kind of just gone. So it hits you a lot harder as well. If that's any help at all, it probably isn't. I don't know.
I've been diagnosed for the second time in my life with ADHD, and I'm waiting for autistic spectrum diagnosis. But I think it's helpful to look at the whole body, because, for example, for ADHD, I cannot take any medication because I have dysautonomia POTS. I have chronic fatigue, and recently I developed gastritis. Just been to hospital a few days ago. It's just like, you know, I feel when someone has any type of neurodiversity, when person has physical problems like chronic fatigue or any like long COVID or whatever, it's just like the symptoms are getting so much harder to manage, because for ADHD person, I want to be active because I get dopamine from it. And it's just so hard when I don't have energy for it. So it's much worse. With autistic spectrum, I'm more strict to rules. I'm getting much more irritated, like webinars, you know, support groups. If someone doesn't follow the rules, I'm really, really like angry. And it's hard to like hold that if I don't have energy for that. So I think it's important to be aware of comorbidities and physical issues. And I'm using ADHD coach because the therapy didn't work for that, but ADHD coach also helps me with autistic spectrum, because there are so many things in common between ADHD and autism, I find. So it helps me, but just having such a complex problems, you know, especially now during the COVID, you know, time, and additional issues like anxiety due to war in Ukraine. It's just so much at one time, and my body just cannot cope.
Thank you for sharing, Anna.
I think a lot of people are resonating a lot with what everyone is saying. I think Emma had a really interesting comment, and she says, like many others have realized so much about myself following my son's diagnosis. I have not been formally diagnosed, but it has helped me to know you're not just lazy, useless, socially awkward, failing, and to set boundaries and to explain why I have trouble with various things. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks, Anna, for sharing, Audrey for sharing, everyone who's been able to share today. It's been really interesting.
There's a question I want to ask Andrea. Where's this clinic in London she's talking about? Is it a specialist you've got to have a referral by a GP for the specialist?
I was referred by my surgeon because she did a fantastic job on my surgery because it was really complex. So I had to have quite a few different specialists in there due to the adhesions being stuck to different organs. It's such a lovely conversation to have. I'm sorry to anyone that's squeamish. But her bedside manner was pretty rubbish, and the aftercare on the HRT side of things wasn't very good, and I was struggling to get hold of her. So again, I just put everything in writing, and I was pushing, and she agreed to refer me. He's a really famous guy actually for the PMDD side of things too. He's called Dr. Nick Panay, and I'm under his team at Chelsea and West, and I was really lucky enough to be able to have that on the NHS and to be referred, but the wait was quite fairly long, but they are really thorough. I will say that, you know, they're not just dealing with my HRT, they're dealing with other queries. They're getting me a pelvic scan, they're getting me bone scan to check my bone density. So they are really on top of things there. So again, it's I think I don't know how, I don't know what you're going through at the minute with regards to HRT or anything like that. If you're interested in looking into that, or if you already take it, I mean, the only thing you can do again is my suggestion would be keep pushing whoever it is that you see currently, and if you're not happy with them, always push for a second opinion, or again push to see if it's that bad. My autism as well, it could be the way that I'm dealing with it. It's so hard. It's just, again, it's that sort of that opening a can of worms and also trying to separate what's causing what is very difficult as well. That's what I find. I don't know if that made any sense either. I just sort of went my head a bit, but it's yeah, you've just got to push. And but yeah, if you look at Dr. Nick Panay, he's on YouTube. He does he's done loads of interviews, podcasts, all sorts on the menopause, on women's health. He's a specialist man in the.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, I really have enjoyed today, and I hope all of you have too, particularly as someone who is normally sharing knowledge about neurodiversity. To have a place where I can actively sit back and learn, I think has been absolutely priceless. Now, just so you know, because we do these every week, if any of you are new, next week we're swapping it a little bit, and we're going back to birth, autism in babies and young children. Now, you might think that we've done children, we know a lot about them now, move on. But with this webinar, we're going to be focusing more on what is the youngest age you can be diagnosed with autism? Like, is it the day you're born? Is it a few weeks after? Really looking at how do the characteristics kick in so soon? And when can you make support? Because I actually remember when I was diagnosed. It's really weird because I think it was just such a odd experience. I was just crawling around this like office, and I was like, and they were just like taking notes about me, monitoring me. And I always wondered as I grew up, I'm like, well, how did they know at such a young age? How can you make such a big decision that's going to affect me for the rest of my life? And also, maybe I was just being a child, maybe I was just having fun, maybe I didn't want to talk. How did you know that was autism spectrum disorder? So I think this is going to be an interesting webinar, focusing more on how do you even know it's autism at such a young age, rather than like another angle, which I think has kind of been done plenty. So do check that out. You can click the little link on your phone if you want to join. If not, just go on Eventbrite or our website. And I think that is the end, and we're going to call it quits today. But I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to all of you for attending, and for Yasoda for being our special guest today, which I hope you enjoyed seeing a different face, because otherwise it's just all you're seeing is me. But it's really interesting, and I hope to get more guests as we go forward, but would love to know your feedback, and thanks again. All right, well, I'm going to end the call now, but it's been a pleasure as always, and have a great rest of your week and day, and hopefully see you again next Thursday. Oh yeah, happy Easter. Enjoy your eggs.